Hello everyone and welcome to our first ever demo day for the HS2 Accelerator programme. I'm Jasmine Pollock, HS2 Accelerator Manager, and it has been an absolute pleasure working with these 5 startups since September. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about their innovative solutions and how they'll bring huge benefits to the HS2 project. There will be an interactive Q&A session after each startup presents, so please do use the Q&A box below to share any questions that you have throughout the presentations. At the end of the event, we will be opening up networking rooms. We will share the joining links for these in the chat box, and you may have also received them previously in advance of this session. There is a great opportunity to converse more openly with the startups in these chat rooms and ask any outstanding questions that you may have. First of all, I'm going to hand over now to Howard Mitchell, Head of Innovation at HS2.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much, Jazz. As introduced, my name's Howard Mitchell, and I head up innovation here at HS2. Today's a really proud day to invite everybody in the room to join us to understand a little bit more about what's been happening in the HS2 Accelerator, some of the great successes and the great technology that's been brought through by the 5 outstanding companies that have been part of the accelerator up to now. I'd just like to say a few words really in that innovation, and especially innovation at HS2, is really a team game. It's something that requires not only great entrepreneurial startups and talent like you'll see today, support from people and engineers within the HS2 program and our colleagues at DFT, but also our world-class supply chain. So all of us have really been pulling together in order to deliver innovation. And one of the key things you'll see today is it takes more than 1 or 2 companies or 1 or 2 people. This is really a huge team effort and everybody pulling together, and something that I'm incredibly proud of. Within HS2, we are changing the face of British industry, and in doing so, we are driving the new standards for innovation. We need to leave a legacy of great ideas, companies, and people once this program is complete. And that's something that we are driving via our accelerator, and also by building a broader innovation cluster around the HS2 program, be that advanced academic study, meaning that we become the center for sort of construction excellence and transport related infrastructure, new startup and entrepreneurial business, and then also driving and changing standards in our existing supply chain and partners, whether that's health, safety, or environment. And some great ideas are now really coming into commercial reality today. The SME sector is particularly important to innovation. It is the sector that really causes disruption. In the larger corporate organizations, innovation is great and moves forward, but it's generally incremental. The smaller companies you see today will push us forward much faster and quicker than some of the larger organizations, because they don't have the legacy and the day job. In order for them to exist, they have to prove a new way of doing things. And it's something that you will start to see, that these ideas are quite simple, but very, very powerful. I'm looking forward to understanding and seeing how some of these ideas will evaluate and develop new, create new savings and in terms of carbon and cost within the program over the forthcoming years. And I'd like to hand over now to Alan Nova and the team from DFT to give us a few words on the position of government and innovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Howard, and thanks for inviting me here today. I'm Director for HS2 Phase 1 and 2A at the Department for Transport, and that means I'm responsible for getting the line built from London up to Crewe through HS2 Limited and its supply chain partners. I'm personally a massive supporter of innovation, and I know that's true for Andrew Stevenson too, who's our sponsor minister. HS2 is a national endeavour and aims to transform travel between the country's biggest cities, to link our most important economic regions and so level up the country, to boost productivity and provide a greener alternative to road and rail travel. They're pretty big ambitions, right? But that's what we want to achieve. We also want to be ambitious about how we achieve it. And my job's to get all of that done to schedule and budget, if I all boil it down. But to do that, or to do better than that and beat our schedule and budget, we need to get better at building railways, and innovation has to make a vital contribution to that. So some innovation might come from large companies, it might come from government departments, but in reality, it's much more likely to come from you guys, from individuals with good ideas and a burning passion to change things for the better, and a motivation to make it happen by starting your own businesses, getting your ideas into reality, getting your products and services sold to the big businesses that are going to help us deliver this project. And by doing that, getting a great product, getting a great service, getting a great solution that will help this country. And we've got a unique opportunity here, I think, because of the scale of this program, but also its enduring nature. You've got 10, 20 years of a stable environment in which we can innovate. And because we're going through multiple phases, building to Birmingham and then to Crewe and then to Manchester and then to the east of the country, we've got an opportunity to progressively learn, innovate, apply and revise how we do it to get the job done. And we need government and we need our supply chain partners to take up your innovations and to apply them to get this big job done. And the demos that you're going to show us today align exactly with our priorities in relation to digitising construction, driving improved productivity, improving health and safety, and mitigating the inevitable environmental impact we have in building this railway, even if we're trying to do so in the most sustainable way we ever have. Now, that's why you're all here, and I want to congratulate you, James, Kat, Roy, Adam, Philip, and your teams for your insight and your innovation. And I want to thank HS2 Limited and its supply chain partners for helping to foster that. So my message is to get out there, guys, disrupt us, help us deliver better and more innovatively, and grow great British new businesses in the way that you do that. So thank you all and go for it.
Thank you so much for that, Alan. So first of all, we'll be hearing from Michelle Oldfield. She's GIS lead at EKFB Joint Venture to introduce Sensat.
Thanks, Jazz, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Michelle Oldfield. I'm the GIS lead at EKFB, and we're delivering civil engineering works across an 80-kilometre section of the project. Our vision is to deliver exceptional services and results that create a safe and sustainable high-speed railway, and of course, future growth for the UK. So staying on the theme of exceptional, I've had the privilege of working with Sensat for 2 years now, and their enthusiasm, passion, technical expertise, and customer-centric approach to problem solving has enabled us to realise some key benefits already for the project. We use Sensat's high-quality survey data and leverage their visualisation platform to add in our own project information, allowing us to build a common picture. We were then able to disseminate this platform to stakeholders to ensure a holistic, coordinated and collaborative approach to design and complex interfaces. We found decisions could be made more accurately, timely and coordinated, reducing the risk and driving cost savings. The benefits already realised are just the tip of the iceberg. And so with that, I'm delighted to introduce James Dean, Sensat CEO, to share how Sensat are visualising the bigger picture on infrastructure projects like HS2. Thank you.
afternoon, everyone. I wanted to take the next couple of minutes to take us through what we've learned on the Accelerator program and how this can drive massive efficiencies in our ability to deliver HS2. At Sensat, we capture, aggregate and visualize digital construction data to help civil infrastructure programs like HS2 make more informed decisions based on their real site data. To do this, we use autonomous mapping drones. They fly about 120 meters above the ground, and they efficiently conduct topographical surveys and capture data without the need for boots on the ground, road closures or even landowner permissions. This year alone, we've actually captured over 112 square kilometers of UK infrastructure sites, including likes of Heathrow, the entirety of HS2, and also the M25. The result is an accurate digital site replica, captured quicker and at a lower cost than traditional methods. Throughout our time on the Accelerator, we've spoken to hundreds of people and asked them the same question. Could you imagine the possibilities of being able to go anywhere on site, instantly? There's a lot of data out there, but bringing it together in a meaningful way has been nearly impossible. HS2 represents one of the most ambitious and complex large-scale civil infrastructure projects ever undertaken. The program will consist of over 400,000 contracts, split over hundreds of companies, each with their own methodologies, practices and standards. This disparate approach has little or no contractual requirement to share topographical and construction data amongst other program participants, and this has the potential to create massive inefficiencies, which will waste billions. For example, we've found that the same topographical survey has been procured many times over, often with varying standards of quality and levels of accuracy. This is cost ineffective and increases the occurrence of errors. In turn, this has implications for assurance and reporting, with often little oversight at best and sample checks being conducted on works as delivered. This opens the door then for future disputes, variation orders, compensation events, or even worse, engineering faults that lay dormant. And it also adds significant time, money and carbon waste to the program overheads, with site walkthroughs alone costing an estimated 65 million per year. These information silos that everybody has raised is creating inefficiencies at every level of the program. We've estimated that this is probably costing around a 15% drag on program efficiency and is making interface management between contracts and between sections exceedingly difficult. So here's the solution. We integrate these data silos, we increase transparency, and we communicate visually to boost program efficiencies. Through the Accelerator, Sensat are now standardizing topographical survey data capture across sections N1 and N2 using our fixed-wing autonomous mapping drones. This will increase program and progress transparency, data usability, survey speed, worker safety, and interface collaboration. At the same time, it's going to significantly reduce carbon overhead, work and procurement duplication, engineering errors, rework, disputes, program drag, and cost. And most importantly, we're building for the HS2 program a common visualization environment, a powerful cloud-based platform that allows HS2 to track and visualize dynamic project performance in real time. This is a huge breakthrough and it'll help us to uncover and quantify the value for HS2 if we were to scale this route-wide. The vision for us is to have continually updated real-time site environments which people can do work digitally that they normally do physically. The idea is to bring together engineers, project managers, design teams in a simple, intuitive way to ensure the success of delivery on HS2.
Fantastic. So now if I can just ask the audience for any questions that they may have following that video from James. James is here to join us for a live Q&A. So whenever you're ready, pop some questions down in the chat box and we will address those. First question, James. To what extent do you feel that the programme has accelerated your route to market?
It's a really good question, and I think one which is probably the biggest benefit, or one of the biggest benefits of being a part of the program. So we've actually been, I'd say, involved loosely since about 2017 with HS2. We actually scanned the entirety of HS2 back in the end of 2017. And we didn't know anyone at HS2. We didn't know who could potentially utilize this. And basically off the back of that, we managed to kind of get some contacts, do some work with Michelle, for example, in UKFB. But the whole time, we really didn't have a coordinated approach. We were doing, I think, on 3 or 4 different joint ventures, little pockets of work here or there. But we knew that actually by bringing this together and kind of centralizing it, we could have a much broader impact for the entire program. So really actually bringing this to the exec level to actually work with the heads of departments And we've essentially, like the single source of people really trying to figure out these problems from HS2 perspective, we've been able to align a lot of different stars. And what's really interesting about what we do is it does cover multiple facets of delivery, and therefore being able to bring these things together was really, really important from a central perspective.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, James. There's a question here regarding drones standards. So did you find with HS2 that there was a standard for the drones that were used? Do you use your own drones? How does that work?
I think that a standard for drones is probably the wrong way to look at it. A standard for the data and the data outputs which are being produced is probably the right way to look at it. The answer is at the moment no, but there's a couple of different people looking at different aspects of this as well. To be quite frank, the program needs a consistent method of data collection, and it needs it on a frequent basis as well. And the kind of payoff and rewards from that is massive. Where that data comes from, that doesn't particularly matter as long as it's been done in a consistent manner.
Perfect. And have you got any plans to expand your product offering in the future, or is the focus at the moment just scaling what you've currently got as your product offering?
It's a good question. So we've got two different offerings. So one is around data, and essentially what we're looking for data side is how do we digitize or introduce technology to the surveying process. So this includes UAVs, which we're kind of known for, but also things like driven lidar, laser scanning, even satellite data, as well as ground penetrating radar. So adding all of this on the kind of one-stop shop is really important. The second side of that is how you use it. And we kind of got glimpses of that in the video a second ago, which is really kind of building what we've termed as common visualization environment. So something which actually augments a lot of the existing software suites, a lot of the existing databases, but actually just brings this information to a very visual and intuitive way. And that's important because when we're dealing with real things, real tangible things like we are on HS2, we as humans recognize them in the fact that they are physically there, they're spatially somewhere, they've got context to them. So being able to visually communicate, we found is massively important and a big win for a lot of the programs that use this.
Perfect. And to what extent are the drones and surveying impacted by weather and fog and things like that?
So surprisingly, not as much as you probably think in the UK, where the weather sort of changes every 5 minutes, every 5 miles. Typically speaking, we can generate around 10 kilometers on average a day of data. Now, that can be scaled up, it can be scaled down, depending on what's required. And you typically wouldn't fly in something like the rain or super high wind, not because it's actually detrimental to the drone, but it's detrimental to the type of data that you can produce. So if you imagine there's rain or wetness or fog, for example, the data is not going to be the highest quality. So that's typically the reason you pull back from weather, as opposed to the weather actually impacting it directly itself.
Brilliant. And how, in regards to kind of augmented reality and kind of virtual reality, is there any plans for that kind of technology to be applied, or do you already use it to a certain extent?
These data sets go directly into AR and VR in native format. We built it that way specifically. However, and it's quite a key point from my point of perspective, is that I think that as an industry, we're not fully utilizing the data in its current format. So I do see something like VR being a little bit gimmicky, and actually we need to learn to kind of walk before we can run. At the moment, we're underutilizing the data we have. Let's kind of get to the point where we're really utilizing that, as I mentioned, kind of communicating with it visually. And once we've done that, there's definite applications where AR and VR, and probably AR specifically, can really add a lot of value, in which case let's start to kind of move into those areas as well.
Perfect. And are you connected with any other sources or integrated with any other sources of information to break those data silos and access it through your software instead?
100%. So if I could basically leave one sort of like line which was important, is that we're about breaking down those data silos. And that doesn't mean like scrapping systems we have and moving to something different. No, it means about integrating those existing systems that we have. So be it looking at some of the asset management or common data environments like ProjectWise, for example, going all the way through to file types coming from Bentley, from AutoCAD, etc. as well. So really our mission is to kind of break these data silos, bring them together, and put them in a sense where people can actually start to use them in context now.
Perfect. And are there any of the lessons, are any of the lessons that you've learned or any of the use cases that you've developed been incorporated into the eventual operation and maintenance of HS2 as well going forward?
So two, I guess, really great stories from this. So the first one is actually a lot of the planning works have been difficult to proceed with just because of landowner permissions and actually the whole kind of administrative effort that goes with that. So we've been able to deliver, immediate access digitally from anywhere for a lot of the kind of questions that you'd normally have to visit site for. And across some of the areas in N1 and N2 where we're currently rolling this out,
we've realized that that could save up to about 65 million a year if it was taken to the entire kind of program length. So that's kind of one of the immediate value propositions. What we've also done, and I think Alan mentioned this, which is so important, is that we've taken these lessons and we're now starting to implement them in phase 2B. So we've currently, I think, or we're about to digitize the entirety of phase 2, really so we can take the lessons that we've learned in construction and design now and actually apply them much earlier on for program efficiency and benefits.
Fantastic. And what sets you apart from other companies who offer similar kind of drone surveying services in this space?
I'd say two things for us. Like, we're the largest in the UK at specifically drone surveying, and really with that comes like a wealth of experience in just how to do this. And you know, that does set you apart somewhat in terms of the amount of delivery, but we're always looking to kind of open source that knowledge if we can. So really two things. One, our size in terms of the ability just to hit and cover like large civil infrastructure. We currently, I think, have covered the largest rail projects, highways with the M25, and then aviation with Heathrow in the UK, and it's something we're really proud of. And secondly, just that knowledge about how to do this at large scale is super important as well. So as an example, we found from hundreds of thousands of hours of delivery that actually about 3 kilometers length is about the distance of data you could produce on one sort of reference system before actually you start to introduce errors because of the curvature of the Earth. So it's really kind of these new kind of cutting edge frontier kind of problems you just wouldn't have had under the traditional methods, which we're learning about. And basically that knowledge imparted into the delivery of what we have and quality of what we have, I think, sets us apart.
Fantastic. And I think you may have slightly answered that one, this next one, but I'll ask it anyway. So what additional value do you feel that your users get from your platform rather than just kind of taking and manipulating the drone data themselves?
The biggest one is actually, and the aha moment, as we call it for a lot of people, is actually when they start to bring their survey data in. And that survey data is not just drone data, but it could be their ground penetrating radar, it could be the LiDAR data, it could be their CAD. And then suddenly they start to bring their designs in there as well. And you start to see these two worlds, which have traditionally been apart, so GIS and CAD, for the first time coming together and really being used in that same environment. And crucially, and hopefully you've seen it very quickly on the videos there, it's so quick to use. Like, the idea is that this is not something which you need a special computer with a supercomputer or a license that costs thousands of pounds. You can basically spin this up on your iPhone and find that information. So we really want to democratize that and put it into everybody's hands. And the frustrations that people have around finding information, sharing information at the moment, completely done away with this. And I think that's the thing that people really appreciate.
Perfect. And then just the final question that we'll have time for. Which part of the world, this is quite interesting, which part of the world do you see the largest growth for your offering, for your technology in the future?
It's interesting. Like, actually, I think the UK market is specifically hard for startups to kind of work here. And we have, people on our board that have grown £1 billion plus businesses in construction software that basically said what you do in the UK is probably worth 10x in different markets as well. For us specifically, we're probably looking at going to where our customers are. So we've currently got 45 tier 1 customers. So that's looking at places like Canada, for example, could be Australia, potentially the US. So that's kind of where we're looking to go at the moment. In terms of where it can have the biggest impact, a bit of a kind of toss-up between developed nations which are investing in infrastructure where information management is so crucial, or developing nations which actually maybe couldn't afford to access this level of infrastructure now, but actually by automating and digitizing all of the processes, we can actually now make it affordable. So I think there's sort of two different strands there, and maybe both as well.
That's really, really interesting. Guys, if you are interested in connecting with James, do feel free to scan the QR code on this screen and you'll be directed to his LinkedIn, where you can find out more about James and also Sensat. If you've got any questions, which I know there were absolutely loads, but unfortunately we don't have time for all of them right now, please do join the networking rooms at the end of the session, which there'll be a link for in the chat, and you can talk to James a little bit more freely and answer any questions that we might have missed. But thanks so much for that, James.
Thank you. See you soon.
Cheers. Next, we're going to hear from Kat Stanhope. Kat is the ecology lead for phase 1 at HS2 Limited.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, I'm Kat Stanhope, ecology lead on phase 1 of HS2. My role is to ensure that the work that we are carrying out on ecological surveys, assessments, mitigation, management and monitoring follows standards and good practice, but also that we're using innovation to drive efficiencies. And I'm really excited to be working with the companies on the Innovation Accelerator programme and to be using HS2 project as a platform to trial innovations in ecology and biodiversity. We've got a chance to carry out some research on a large scale, test new technologies, and use existing technologies in new ways to benefit the project and the wider industry. And that includes challenging some of the way that current industry approaches are done. And I'm really delighted to introduce Nature Metrics today. They were selected for the Biodiversity Challenge for their work on environmental DNA and using the power of big biodiversity data. We're already working with Nature Metrics on the analysis of woodland soils using eDNA metabarcoding. And we're also looking to do some trial studies on pond surveys and monitoring to get better data in a more cost-effective way. And where we can, we're looking at combining that with the ability to include local communities along the project through citizen science. So I'm really pleased to be introducing and handing over to Kat Bruce, who's the founder of Nature Metrics.
Hi, my name's Dr. Kat Bruce. I founded Nature Metrics in 2016 to transform the way we monitor the natural world. Because nature has a measurement problem. We're in the middle of a mass extinction. 3/4 of our insects have disappeared, and we only noticed when we didn't have to wipe them off our windscreen anymore. How is it possible to miss a decline on that scale when businesses like HS2 are already spending tens of millions of pounds on biodiversity surveys, and our other clients like BP and Anglo American are doing the same? The problem is they're spending that money to monitor just a handful of species, like newts, bats and badgers. That's like Google Maps trying to predict traffic flow from just a handful of cars. We know that in complex systems, we need lots of data points to get an accurate picture. We need big data. What big data does is allow these huge noisy data sets to drive simple, accurate metrics. And that's what we need for biodiversity, because nature is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So what's stopping us from taking a big data approach to biodiversity? Quite simply, there's been a bottleneck when it comes to turning nature into data. Until now, we've had to examine each organism individually to identify and record it. That means traps, identification keys, and microscopes. And it's just not possible to generate big data that way. Nature Metrics has changed this landscape. We've swapped the traps and the microscopes for DNA sequencing, which lets us identify thousands of species at once, giving those all-important data points. And we don't have to catch the animals to do this, because their DNA is in the water. So with simple kits that even school children can use, DNA is filtered out of the water and sent to our lab for analysis. Sequencing the DNA in just 1 litre of river water gives as much data on fish species as up to 10 years of conventional surveys and costs about 100 times less. What's more, from that same water sample, we can look for other types of organisms, from bacteria to beavers, without having to send anyone else out on site. So for the effort it took them to survey one species, we provide data on hundreds. With 18 PhDs in our team, we are world leaders in applying this technology and are already using it on projects all over the world, from mining projects in West Africa to conservation projects in the Amazon rainforest and infrastructure projects like HS2 in the UK. We're saving our clients money, reducing the risk to their staff and contractors, and doing a better job for biodiversity. The world is changing. We know we have to do something different. Biodiversity net gain legislation means projects will soon be legally required to leave the environment in a better state than they found it. We're making sure every company can achieve this.
Fantastic, thank you so much for that. So we've got Kat Bruce here today to answer some live questions with you. So first question for you, Kat. To what extent has being part of the HS2 Accelerator helped you build relationships with regulatory bodies and kind of really hammer home the whole process of kind of policy change? How do industry step change and policy change?
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we do, because I think we're
very much sort of building the foundations for a whole new industry here. And, you know, Nature Metrics is working across a large number of different sort of stakeholder groups, from academic scientists through to regulators and businesses, and sort of everybody involved in that sort of transformative change within an industry. So we have actually had quite a good relationship with the regulators for quite a long time, and we're in a nice position where we know that this is something they're really interested in. It's the direction that they feel like environmental monitoring and management is going to go over the next few years. But what we sort of lacked was just a central place to bring it all together and actually trial something out. And I think what we found over the last few years is if you really want to take the big steps forward, you need to have projects that simultaneously engage all of those different stakeholders, so you can bring everybody around the table and start from the same position on a project and take them all along with you. So that's what HS2 and this accelerator has sort of given us the opportunity to do, and particularly also actually having both the consultants who are delivering the work on the ground and the sort of end client HS2 together in a room, and being able to work with them at the same time has been incredibly valuable.
Fantastic. And have you approached the use of citizen science at all in this project?
Yes, it's something that we've been talking about. We haven't had a chance yet to trial it on this project in particular, but it's something we've done a lot of over the last year or so through other projects. And it's actually an amazing tool for citizen science because it's incredibly simple to collect samples in the field. And we've worked with primary school children, we've worked with Indigenous assistants in the Amazon rainforest, ecotourism guides, and everybody can collect really high quality samples. So unlike almost any other type of citizen science, where you always have to control quite heavily for the quality of data that you get from citizen scientists, this is something where actually the data is virtually indistinguishable when it comes from the public compared with from professionals. So we talk about this as really democratizing access to biodiversity data, and it means people can, local stakeholders can help hold companies to account. They can go out and collect the data. They can be engaged in that process of monitoring, and yeah, it's just a brilliant sort of connection opportunity.
Completely agree. And to be honest, even school kids, as you said in the video there, it's a great way to educate, and I think that's a great way to engage with the local community. I've got a question here from United Utilities. Have you engaged any water companies so far?
Yes, but actually this is an area that we want to do quite a lot more work in. So we've done some sort of small projects with water companies. We've worked quite extensively with Yorkshire Water on zebra mussel monitoring. So we've done some, we've got a PhD going on at the moment who's sort of looking at the spatial interpretation of data in terms of working out exactly where mussels are if they're detected and what the sensitivity is in different sorts of water bodies. But huge opportunity to use these tools for invasive species monitoring, and sort of informing movement of water from one place to the next. So yeah, really looking for other people to work with in that sector.
Fantastic. And is this technology confined only to water-based species, or can it be exploited across different environments?
No, so I mean, there's a couple of different things there. One is that actually in the water we're picking up pretty much all of the terrestrial vertebrates as well. So an example of this is we did a big landscape scale project in the Peruvian Amazon, where they were just looking for manatees and river dolphins, and we took water samples and ended up with a data set across the whole of this vast area, with about 700 species of vertebrates, and that included like all of the monkeys. We've got small mammals, rodents, tapirs, jaguars, everything. DNA is being washed off the land into the water all the time. So we pick up really nice data at a sort of landscape scale on wider biodiversity. But as Kat mentioned in her introduction, we also apply the sort of same sequencing approach to other types of samples. So something we're doing a lot of now is soil sampling. So looking at the soil microbiome and the sort of slightly larger organisms in the soil, the sort of soil insects and things, and starting to understand what the sort of biological footprint of a healthy soil in particular types of ecosystems is. And you can use that information then to sort of set a benchmark for what your habitat looked like at the beginning, how that's changing over time, whether it's becoming more similar to your sort of reference site if you're creating new habitat, or whether it's being impacted by industrial activity. So it sort of all builds into this general picture of trying to provide tools that allow companies sort of overall to get an idea of how they're, to what extent they've impacted biodiversity in the environment and whether they've been successful in mitigating those impacts.
Fantastic. And how does your accuracy compare to the traditional surveying techniques where you would just look for one species in a sample? How does the accuracy compare?
Really depends what groups you're looking at and what sort of samples you're using. So to take a very straightforward example, sort of fish in European rivers, it's very, very accurate. So we can basically identify everything to species level, and you can get quite semi-quantitative data. So you can sort of see which are the more dominant species in a system and which are only there at very low levels. If you go into I don't know, take soil fauna, where many things even don't have names. They're unknown to science, working lots of nematodes and things, which have huge data potential. They're very responsive to change, but because we haven't described them and named them, we haven't been able to use them as indicators. We can now make use even of those unnamed species as data points. So because you can tell when the same sequence is showing up across different data sets. So that's sort of the other extreme, is taking a taxonomy-free approach to biodiversity. In the middle, we have situations like fish in the Amazon rainforest, where there's big gaps in the reference databases. So we know the species, but we haven't sequenced them, and we don't have those sequence records to compare to. So in those cases, we can say, we can identify some species, other ones will say this is a species within this family or genus, and we can add the name later on when the reference sequence comes along. So yeah, we're sort of used to working across all of those different scenarios.
Perfect. And do you plan to kind of link or integrate the data in a digital way, so you could build almost digital twins or digital representations of ecology for programs like HS2 and wider?
Yeah, absolutely. Digital twin seems to be the word of the year. So we've actually just been part of 2 big consortium applications for EU grants, which are exactly those: a digital twin of the ocean and a digital twin of the fields. And the real power of this comes when you combine this sort of biological data layer with other types of data, so we can make predictive models and sort of really understand what's going on sort of in ecosystems. If you think about satellite data, for example, you can get tons of data, but it's very difficult to actually interpret that often in terms of biodiversity, to sort of know what it is that you're seeing on the ground. So we can use our data to calibrate what we're seeing from those sort of other potentially more scalable tools.
Perfect. And then just the last 2 questions. So the first one, someone said the technology sounds incredible. Do you have any competitors doing anything similar? And if so, how are you different from them?
Yeah, there's sort of a handful of small companies around the world who have got similar technological capabilities as us. Almost all sort of come out of this big research field that has come up through sort of academic ecology. In the UK, there's possibly just one other company who does the sort of multi-species analysis. Quite a lot of companies are doing the detection, sort of screening for individual species. So great crested newts is a good example of that. You can do qPCR tests, which everybody knows about now after COVID, but just to screen for the presence of newts, and there's more competition there. But generally speaking, we've actually been sort of trying to work together with some of the other small companies to lay really solid foundations, because this is a new industry. It's not just a new sort of company. So to give industry and our client base confidence that this is a mature enough technology to use, there needs to be some level of standardization and consensus among us. But I think what sort of sets us apart then is the relationships we've built, the sort of our vision of our sort of high growth model and of what can be achieved with the data that we generate, rather than just the sort of workhorse of the lab that we use.
Perfect. And then just finally, there was lots of cost savings suggested in the pitch video. What's been the biggest blocker, do you feel, to your approach being adopted as a standard?
Part of it is just everybody's got very used to the idea that it's not possible to generate direct biodiversity data. So we found ways around it. So people are sort of quite used to using proxies for biodiversity, or just not doing biodiversity measurement. Part of it is that, a bit like James said, actually, for us as well, the UK can be a challenging place to work because there's very established regulatory frameworks for how things are done, and sort of disrupting those just takes a long time. So, a lot of our biggest clients, our biggest opportunities are across the developing world, where there's sort of a lack of tools and a real appetite and need to do better monitoring. And then, just education, really showing people what's possible. And we get a lot of excitement from our clients and partners, and it's just great to be part of that.
Fantastic. So interesting. Guys, as I said before, if you want to connect with Kat on LinkedIn, find out more about Nature Metrics, find out more about Kat, use that QR code to scan and go to her page. And again, as I said, there are still a couple of questions we didn't have time to answer. So anyone who wants to speak to Kat directly, please join the networking session at the end of this to speak to her a little bit more freely. Thank you so much for your time, Kat. Fabulous. So next up, we're going to hear from Andrew Pestana. He's the Innovation Strategy Manager at HS2.
Hey all, as just said, my name's Andrew Pestana and I'm the Innovation Strategy Manager at HS2. Today I have the great pleasure to introduce you to Roy Damon from BuildDot and his team. BuildDot is a construction tech startup that brings together AI and wearable hardware. The technology that BuildDot offers HS2 a real step change for our stations, head houses and depot construction, for instance, and give us a real value benefit across the program. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Roy and the BuildDot team. Really excited to hear more about what they've been up to with our HS2 Accelerator.
Hi, my name is Roy and I am the CEO and co-founder of BuildDot. The construction industry's productivity gap is one of the biggest challenges of our economy. This productivity gap leads to an approximate $1.6 trillion annual loss globally, which is over 10% of the global construction spend. And actually, over half of that 1.6 trillion could be saved by implementing modern process controls on construction sites. Here at BuildDot, we create what we call the Construction Mission Control Room. And by connecting AI, wearable cameras, and BIM, BuildDot provides full visibility of the entire construction process. Our platform combines seamless data collection together with AI analysis capabilities. That data, delivered through the BuildDot dashboard system, supports decision-making workflows, optimizes site processes, and helps avoid errors and delays. The only thing that is required from the site team is to turn the camera on during the existing site walks. And in return, they get the equivalent of a manufacturing plant control room for their project. Our proprietary analysis engine can determine the status of every task on the construction site at a resolution and frequency that we never considered possible before. But knowing the status of every duct is not enough. It is what you do with the data that counts. So in addition to our dashboards and reports, we also highlight and alert on critical project issues so that the site team can focus on solving the most important problems. Another important aspect of the data is constant improvement, as one project's data can be used to understand bottlenecks and delays for future ones. BuildDot is an Anglo-Israeli company with our R&D center based in Tel Aviv and our business operations in the London office. The company was founded 2 years ago and has raised over $17 million in capital and employs over 50 people in its 2 locations. Within just a year of our product launch, we're already serving over 10 top-tier construction companies in 8 different countries. Joining the HS2 Accelerator program was a significant milestone in our journey, with the potential of improving controls and certainty on one of Europe's biggest infrastructure projects. We're currently working towards the first proof of concept with the HS2 partner network, which will be the first step towards implementation on one of the station's projects. 2020 has been a challenging but exciting year for us at BuildDot. All really looking forward to 2021, seeing our work with HS2 being a significant part of it. Thank you everyone for your time.
Fantastic. So I'm joined with Roy from BuildDot. So just a couple of questions for you, Roy. So just first of all, do the sensors that you use on the hard hat, do they provide real-time data to the dashboards, or is there any delay?
Yeah, so unfortunately on most sites today, you wouldn't have any connectivity on the site So what really happens is that the data is captured on site, and when the site manager go back to the site office, the data is uploaded and analyzed. Our hopefully for the future with that, all sites will be fully connected and then can happen in real time. But for now, that will do.
Fantastic. And what are kind of your future roadmap? You've already had so much traction, as you said there in the video. So what are the kind of future plans for you?
Yeah, so for us, we feel like we're sitting on huge amounts of data that is collected daily on construction sites. And our mission is to try and create more and more value and support more interesting workflows using the data we have. So currently, we've been very focused on providing data for the specific sites we're working on. And now we're looking to make more use of the data for the whole company, the construction company, the client, the subcontractors, and just make sure that everyone earns from the data being collected on site. I think there is tremendous value and insights that we've just started unveiling based on the data we're collecting. There is a lot more to do with what we have.
Fantastic. And just kind of feeding off of that then, what's kind of the biggest lesson you've learned whilst working with HS2 and the supply chain?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that the reason we joined HS2 is quite that. Until now, we've been mainly focused on residential and commercial projects, mid-sized, large-scale one, but still a very different type of construction than what you have on HS2. So for us, this kind of been a journey of understanding needs, understanding processes, workflows, and a very different types and kind of project. Lots of stakeholders involved, much more than your standard private construction. So for us, that was the main goal for the journey, and I feel like we have achieved that.
Perfect. And have you got an example on maybe a past project that you've done where you've kind of evidenced these cost savings or created these efficiencies? Have you got a good example of that?
Sure. So we've done research with a few of our active sites, try to really understand the savings and the implications of what the data is doing for the site team. And the savings come from many areas. So saving time, managers' time on site, foreseeing delays, understanding issues when they're small before they're becoming big ones and become like a snowball effect on site. And the assessment we got to, and that's only on measurable things, with about 2% of the project cost, which I think is quite significant for the industry. And I personally think that this is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can do with what we have.
Perfect. And how accurate would you say that the kind of the AI algorithms that you use after the cameras capture it, how accurate are they in terms of the real life image? Sure.
In terms of progress tracking and process management, I think we're really reaching the close to 100% accuracy in terms of program management. In terms of making sure that everything is in the right place, it really depends on the site conditions, depending on how accurate is the superstructure, which we use as reference points for measuring distance. So that really varies. But in terms of process tracking, process controls, that's really getting too close to 100% accuracy.
Wow, that's amazing. In terms of kind of internationalization, do you find that there's been any kind of challenges, or how have you adapted to having to work kind of in different countries? How do you feel that affects your solution?
Sure. So we have actually had experience working on sites from countries like in the Middle East, like Israel, Japan, the US, many European countries. And I think that the main difference is not with the construction processes themselves, but the way the construction is managed. I think that for us, each country taught us a bit about how should we adapt the way we report, what kinds of insights are more important for those specific site teams, and just making sure that the data is really delivered the best way. I think we've also learned that language is important. We're actually insisting on translating the system and the platform to and localizing for the industry with the idea in mind that everyone on site should be able to use the data comfortably, and not only make it accessible for the project manager or the project director, and really make sure that everyone make the most of the data. But in terms of construction and how it works, I think it's much more similar than we expect within the different countries.
Okay. And with regards to the technology itself, obviously someone's here has said that they can really see the use of it being used inside buildings for assurance checks and structures and things like that. But is there any potential that you can expand it to the external site environment, so the outside, the gardens, the spaces outside?
So the reason we focused on the inside is that we believe that's a real management challenge. Taking a simple residential building with 200 apartments, you'd have maybe a bit over 1,000 rooms in that building, and that's really hard to control from a management perspective. That's why we focus on those areas. We do on our project usually also cover the rooftop and the surrounding areas, but we are very focused on the building itself and then the interior part.
Fantastic. And what project has your system been used on that you're kind of most proud of? What's your kind of biggest achievement to date?
Yeah, so I think I really can't share client names and projects, but I think that what really makes me proud is when we see site teams and site managers being active in terms of the requests from us for custom reports or making adaptations to the system, and just seeing that they're so involved in the way they're accessing the data and using it, and really making a journey with us of turning construction management from something that is really based often on feelings and like personal memories to something that is more data-driven and data-oriented. And this is for me like the shift we've been trying to do for the industry. So those are the moments where I feel really proud when we see a client making a really smart use of the system. I think that one of those examples would be we've had a site where they took their first few months of the project and together with them we drilled into the data and tried to find insights that would serve them for the later part of the project. So we've actually been managed to find like gaps between different subcontractors that could have been minimized, like reducing those buffers and really shortening the construction time by 20 to 30%, just by making the program leaner and more specific to those site teams.
Perfect. And I guess kind of feeding into that, what's the most common? Have you noticed any data trends at all from the data that you've captured? Some of the most common mistakes made on sites, or some of those most common intolerances, perhaps that you've noticed from the data?
Yeah. So from time to time, we're finding those really big issues happening, and then I'm usually really surprised to see how long it takes for a site team to understand those things are happening without build-outs. It could be, I don't know, walls being out of place or windows being installed in the wrong place, which you would expect those are big issues. Someone should notice those not. And the second part are really big delays that are happening. I think that when you're on site and you're really living day by day and trying to really fix things in the process, you sometimes miss the fact that there are huge things happening, huge delays in some areas of the site or some specific trades, that without a report or a system or a dashboard showing you that in your face, it's a bit difficult to understand the extent of the problem you're facing. And I think this is kind of the moments that I'm surprised by the impact of having objective data on the construction site.
Fantastic. And then it says here, which project stakeholders do you think get the most benefit from your solution?
So I think many people see at the beginning, think of our system as more of a supervision platform, just to have a general sense of what's going on, just to make sure that everything is generally according to plan. But in fact, the people getting most value are the site managers, the package managers, the construction managers working on site. Those are the people that can react to things that are happening on site immediately and actually improve and optimize the processes that are happening on the site. I think that the closer you are to the site and what's happening, you have much more power and ability to actually impact the bottom lines of the project. So we see some of them spending hours per day on the tablet app or on their laptop, investigating issues, solving them, and really making sure that the project is delivered in a much better way.
Fantastic. And that's all the questions that we have time for today, Roy, unfortunately, but there are still a couple in the chat. So as I said before with everyone else, if you want to connect with Roy, please do use the QR code to connect with him on LinkedIn and find out more about BuildDots. And if you have any burning questions that you'd still like to know today, please join our networking rooms and we'd be happy to facilitate those for you. Thank you so much, Roy.
Bye.
Yes. Okay, and next we're going to hear from Peter Miller, Director of Environment and Town Planning from HS2 Limited.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Peter Miller. I'm the Environment and Town Planning Director at HS2, and I'm technical authority for such matters, and my team specifies the environment and town planning work. That enables HS2 to be approved by Parliament and delivered well on site. This year is an important year for UK PLC. COP26 in November will provide a sharp focus on climate change and nature recovery. With that in mind, I'm delighted to sponsor the Biodiversity Challenge for the Innovation Accelerator programme. And HS2 ecology is incredibly important for the business and for sustainability. Overall, along the line of the route, we'll be creating a green corridor. And to give you an idea of the scale of that, phase one alone sees around about 3,000 hectares of new wildlife habitat being created. That will consist of around about 7 million trees and shrubs. And we'll be planting around 40 different species of trees, native to the local area and sensitive to climate change. Clearly, HS2 is a massive a massive project, and innovation is absolutely key in its development. And in order to deliver a step change on such a massive programme, we need to revisit the traditional ecological processes. And we think that's going to help us support a very huge restoration activity associated with HS2. So today, I'm delighted to introduce Dendra Systems. Dendra's ecology-trained artificial intelligence system and ecosystem restoration tools are going to be trialled on HS2. That's going to lead to a smarter way of working. It'll enable greater environmental monitoring and assist mitigation, we believe. So HS2 is a proud pioneer with Dendra, and we believe their technology will see a step change in ecological practice. In a little while, you'll meet Adam Philby from Dendra, and now it's over to you.
Globally, about 25% of Earth's total land area has been degraded. When land is degraded, soil carbon is released into the atmosphere, making land degradation one of the most significant contributors to climate change. The question is, can we restore this land, recapture this carbon, and reverse this damage? The answer is yes, we can. We founded Dendra Systems 6 years ago using drone technology to plant seeds at an industrial scale and kickstart this restoration process. It became clear that this was just the start of the journey, and in order to deliver successful restoration, these planted seeds need monitoring and protection to ensure they survive. Early stage restoration is fragile and difficult to survey. Satellite-based technology can only see trees when they're around 10 years old, providing little visibility at the time when it's most needed. As a result, with heavily degraded lands, such as that damaged by construction and mining, restoration efforts have been intensive and expensive, until now. By leveraging drone-acquired imaging, Dendra have built a machine learning-driven platform trained by our ecology team that can identify and measure the health of even the smallest plants, providing insights and informing action to ensure ecosystem restoration is a success. We are currently working with organisations such as BHP, Rio Tinto and Glencore to accelerate the restoration of land severely damaged by mining activities. We are moving into a pilot project with Fusion, and we'd like to expand this initial work across sites route-wide. To show what's possible, here is the difference our technology in 18 months make. This old mine site is now well on its way to becoming a thriving natural ecosystem. Our vision is bold but simple: to accelerate and de-risk the rehabilitation of our planet, to restore biodiversity we have lost, and ensure scalable nature-based carbon sequestration projects. Using our technology and expertise in ecology, data science and drone operations, we believe this is possible. Our team in the UK is looking to replicate the success we've now had in 11 different countries with HS2.
Fantastic. So I'm joined by Adam Philby, VP of Sales at Dendra. And the first question for you, Adam, is can you give an example of what the actionable insights would be that your technology produces?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So one of the challenges with restoration of degraded land is that invasive weed species can hamper the native species that you want to thrive there. So one of the things that we can do is monitor and accurately quantify the distribution and spread of those weed species and allow for really targeted early intervention whilst preserving the native species in there. Another example would be that we can look at identify and quantify erosion risk. So again, with newly formed land, again, from either construction or mining, one of the big threats to restoration there is land movement and erosion. And we can identify that at a fairly early stage, allowing for early mitigation and obviously improved outcomes for the land that's restored above those areas.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And the data that you produce, all of the drone imagery, is that kind of integratable with any systems at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So we upload, it's a huge quantity of data that we gather from an ecosystem. We gather from a number of different sensors, different spectrums. That's all made available via a portal, which can be, the different layers can be interrogated. And all of those layers and all of that information can be exported in reports for assisting with stakeholder management and reporting on the success metrics from a project. But they can also be exported into other GIS tools for incorporation into other data models and digital twins as well.
Fantastic. And do you measure well, you mentioned there in the video that you measure the long-term impact of restoration, but how do you do it and over what time span, or is that entirely responsible for the stakeholders that are involved?
Yeah, so typically most of the projects we're engaged in are for a minimum of 3 years. So initial planting, whether that's seed-based planting that we carry out, hand-based or tractor-based planting, we can monitor all of that activity. And typically we'd look for, in the early stages, monitoring perhaps twice annually. As the projects mature and the ecosystems become more stable, the survey time would reduce to, after 3 years, perhaps to be annually. And then when you get sort of 5 years, 5, 7, when you get to around 10 years old, satellite data becomes much more useful in quantifying the health of those ecosystems when the species are a lot larger.
Fantastic. And you mentioned other projects that you've been a part of. So can you give some examples of some of those projects that you've been involved in, and which one you would say is probably your favourite or the one you're most proud of?
Yeah, I think we're proud of all of them. We've worked on a variety of projects across 11 different countries. Some of those working with commercial organisations, such as the mining companies that are mentioned there. It's great to see the efforts that are being put in there to restore the land as quickly as possible following mining activities. We've also done a lot of work in Southeast Asia around mangrove restoration. And that's really quite key when you're looking at the not just the carbon that's sequestered into those environments, but also the protection that the mangroves provide, for those coastal communities as well. So that's some of the really there's some of the really exciting projects where you not just make a difference to the environment, but you also make a direct difference to some of the communities that are living within those environments as well.
Fantastic. And how do you ensure that planting taking place doesn't encroach on adjacent land, which could lead to kind of stakeholder issues between neighbours and landowners?
Yeah, so the seeding is actually is very accurate. So we can seed with a single drone up to about 1.5 tons of seed within a single day. But the accuracy of that is to within 2 to 3 meters. So we typically create a flight path that will always ensure there's a boundary. So the flight paths are pre-programmed into the drones based upon the land, so that we don't seed across a road, for example, if there's a road running across the middle of the property, or seed in areas where there's less likely to be successful germination. And we would create sufficient boundaries between the two land areas to avoid that.
Perfect. And someone's mentioned here that they've seen Dendra showcased on the World Economic Forum, and that showed the automation, of the seed planting. They're wondering here, just feeding into that question you just answered, what's the kind of improvement compared to traditional planting?
Yeah, so really, when a seed hits the ground, either through any direct seeding method, whether that's by hand or by tractor or by drone, the seed has the same chances that it would have being there normally. So what we bring to the table is the ability to do mass seeding. So if you were to consider the hand-based seeding methods versus tractor-based seeding methods, drones just really accelerate that process and allow us to cover a much greater area of land. what we have shown compared to tractor-based approaches is that because the drones are obviously off the ground, we don't create any impact event on the ground, which obviously creates erosion channels, which can compromise the restoration activities. So we see improved results because of that. We can also operate on environments where it's difficult for people to get to, and also where it's difficult for machinery to get to, such as on slopes. And we can tailor the planting and the seed density to ensure that we can get a really good coverage on very steep environments, steep parts of environments, to restore and stabilize that land as well. But it's any success that you would see from direct hand seeding, we would see the same level of results, or we've seen in the field the direct same levels from drones.
Fantastic. And to what extent do you feel you need to have an understanding of the local ecology and climate as part of that offering? If, for example, you're working in Asia or other climates that are different from Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. So in each of the environments we work in, so if you were to look at Dendra and sort of cut the company in half, over a third of the company are ecologists. And they're based around all different parts of the world where we have projects, but we also engage with ecologists that work at our customers. We also engage with local landowners, and also within some areas with the indigenous communities as well, who have a far better understanding of the land, the environment, than we ever will. So we incorporate all of that knowledge into our processes and into our product. And when we work on a particular product, whilst we have a really good platform, ecology trained platform that we built, we also always incorporate new samples from that particular environment as well, to take into consideration some of the the regional variances with particular species. So it's absolutely key that we incorporate that knowledge into the planning and also the delivery phase of our projects.
Fantastic. And you've mentioned there obviously your projects and kind of use cases and case studies on mine sites and things like that. Do you have any kind of use case examples for rail infrastructure, but not necessarily how it'd be used for HS2 when we're doing the build, but for kind of rail maintenance? Is there any use cases you could use there?
So typically what we've looked at along transport corridors is the stabilization, is looking at vegetation along the sides of the tracks. Obviously is famous for leaves on the line in the UK, but what we can look at is we can create a very accurate per plant map of every single species along a particular corridor, and determine whether they're suitable or unsuitable, native or invasive, but also look at how they contribute to the stability of those embankments as well alongside a rail network. And that can obviously be used for building predictive models in terms of potential risks that could occur by that, potential load of foliage into that environment, and then help to plan the maintenance schedules as well. So we've done work in those areas, and again, that's something we'd like to explore with HS2 as well.
Fantastic. And then just the final question, with regards to kind of natural flood management, is that something that you've considered when you use the aerial planting or any of the use cases for the technology?
Yeah, so not just flood management, but the whole area, the whole ecosystem and climate, and also there's a number of different factors here. So flood risk is obviously one of them, but also the risk from encroachment onto that land from a lot of the areas that we work in. There's a potential risk of cattle getting onto the land. So we look at a number of different factors that could pose potential risks to the projects, and if they're substantial enough, then it's not a project that we would necessarily engage in until those risks have been completely mitigated. Seed supply is a very precious commodity. There's a whole supply chain in terms of providing seed for these projects around the world, and with some species they're pretty rare, pretty valuable. So we need to make sure that the right one of the key things with mass tree planting is to make sure that the right trees are planted, or the right, not just trees, but shrubs, grasses, all the key components of that ecosystem from a floral perspective are appropriate to that environment. They're planted in the right place at the right time in the right way, or the consequences are actually counterproductive to what we're all trying to achieve here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Adam. That was really, really insightful. Guys, again, as I say, do feel free to scan the QR code there to connect with Adam, and do join the networking rooms later on today if you have any further questions or would like to speak kind of more openly and actually show your face and your own voice. Next up, we'll be hearing from Tina McHugh. Tina is the concrete operations lead at Alpha BT Vinci for the HS2 Area North.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Tina McHugh. I'm Concrete Operations Manager working for Balfour Beatty Vinci on HS2 Area North. In Cloud Cycle, I see the marriage of the traditional in concrete and the modern in digital technology. Through this combination, Cloud Cycle have developed a truly innovative product that will help us think differently about how we manage concrete delivery and control quality across the project. I'm delighted to be working with Cloud Cycle and look forward to trialling their technology across our works. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Philip White and I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Cycle. At Cloud Cycle, we're aiming to solve some of the biggest challenges the concrete industry is facing today. From quality management, where concrete arrives on site and it's rejected because it's out of specification, causing waste, cost, and downtime, to order management, making sure that the right amount of concrete is ordered for each pour on the job, avoiding surplus and further wastage and the cost associated with that. To logistics, making sure that the right amount of concrete is being delivered per hour, using optimal routes, making sure that the concrete arrives in a timely manner to make sure that it doesn't spoil in the truck. Through to environmental and legal compliance, detecting things like washout behaviour, protecting your exposure to potential fines or levies. Concrete is 8% of global CO2. And we believe that by focusing on these major challenges, we can really help the industry reduce their carbon footprint. And with 5% of concrete being wasted, we can get that number down, saving billions in the process while reducing waste to landfill, as well as reducing the attached carbon. At Cloud Cycle, we have a 3-pillar approach: data, profit, planet. Cloud Cycle generates its own data using our hardware that we deploy in concrete trucks, and we integrate that seamlessly into existing data in our existing customer systems. We put that through our machine learning algorithms to provide predictive analytics and insights on your concrete operations and quality like never before. We drive profit using the principles of the circular economy. In fact, Cloud Cycle's technology could help the industry save £40 billion a year through waste reduction and operational efficiencies. And finally, for the planet, Cloud Cycle can help companies achieve their net zero targets, exceed ESG targets, all through the waste reduction and CO2 tracking and savings that we can implement. Our C-Cube platform is designed to benefit ready-mix providers, concrete construction companies, as well as clients. Cloud Cycle's innovative predictive data systems integrate seamlessly into your existing systems using proprietary technology which is simple and fast to implement. Our hardware fits on concrete trucks. It collects data that sends it to our cloud box and sends it back to our back-end system. We provide deep insight into your operations and concrete, including predictive slump and flow. We can give insights into average site waiting times, accepted, rejected batches, cubic meters per hour, predicted slump and flow, how much concrete has been wasted or recycled. And all this information is available in a real-time customer dashboard, driving operational improvements, improving quality assurance, avoiding waste, and exceeding ESG targets. We've got great customer traction. We're working with Cemex, Lafarge Holcim London Concrete, as well as HS2 and BBV. We've raised £3 million to date, and over the next year, we're looking to continue our expansion of pilots across London and HS2 to validate a surplus redistribution platform, our integration into BIM, CO2 certification, as well as develop our business model and pricing. We are looking for more and more pilot partners, as well as investors as we're raising in Q3 this year. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic. So I'm joined with Phil White from Cloud Cycle, just to answer some of your questions today. So just first of all, what's some of the biggest lessons that you've learned recently whilst on the accelerator program and engaging with HS2?
I guess just the complexity of the supply chain and how difficult it is to navigate, and how much more difficult it would have been had we not been on the accelerator program. Just how different projects set up. I used to work in government myself with Transport for New South Wales in Australia. And we never, unfortunately, had a well thought out innovation process like HS2 do. So it used to be a nightmare to try and bring innovation in, and we used to lose lots of projects and cool ideas because of it. And I think, the unpicking of the complexity of the supply chain on the accelerator has been amazing in the introductions, and we've managed to secure, a pilot moving forward. So we'll hopefully continue on that ilk and be successful to roll out there.
Fantastic. And could you explain in a little bit more detail how you integrate your technology to connect the data? I know that you mentioned there that you integrate with customer systems. So what kind of integrations are possible?
Yeah, sure. So you've heard examples of a few of the different entrepreneurs on the line here talking about the difficulty and the challenges around data sitting in silos. And we don't want to come in and reinvent the wheel or anything like that. So we want to come in and understand what data exists. Is it in a system that's currently working for you as a customer? And if it is, then we can put our data in and around yours and into your system. So we pull obviously data direct from concrete trucks, so slump, flow, temperature, volume, location. And all of this information can either be presented to you on our dashboard that we built for you or in your existing system. So for example, Cemex have Cemex Go. There's a system in the US called Concrete Direct, which is an ordering system that Lafarge Holcim pioneer. And we're looking at building APIs to plug into all these different systems, as well as developing BIM integration as well. So, we were talking about as-built earlier on and making sure that there's real-time data there. We will be able to tell which concrete from which truck was put in which hole at what slump, at what time, at what site. And then we can automatically send that to the BIM system and notify an engineer to say this pole's complete, we believe that it's in standard, and they can then mark that off and come back and check it later if they'd like to. So we're really open, and one of our biggest advantages that we're truly trying to do here is we're spending a lot of time and effort on developing APIs that are fit for industry. And we're also looking at what other solutions out there in terms of technology apps that are most commonly used on construction sites, because if there's already a tool out there that's another startup that's got 80% market share on site, then we're not scared to go to them and try and integrate with them rather than the legacy systems as well. So we're open to any conversation, and ultimately we want to look at what systems you have and how we can value to it through our data.
Fantastic. And on that note then of kind of existing solutions, is there anyone else that you're aware of that's doing anything similar to this?
Yeah, there's a couple of incumbents. There's a solution called Verify. Now they've been around for about 15, 20 years with not too much innovation in what they're doing, but they can measure kind of reactive slump, and they store it on a database. And then once you get back to the plant, it downloads it into a report for you and you can kind of see it. And they kind of take a smart truck approach where there's lots of expensive equipment on the truck and interventions and things, whereas we've really simplified it. And we believe in smart cloud, and we're using machine learning. So we can deploy machine learning across our system, compare every batch with every batch that's come before. So we can actually do predictive analytics in terms of seeing problems before they are created. And we can provide interventions early, so we don't need to be reactive all the time. We can predict. And that's our main difference, as well as cost. Our hardware and installation is free up front. The other systems out there are between £2,000 and £5,000, which is a huge barrier of entry if you've got a big fleet to fit out, whereas we can fit out lots of large fleets for relatively low cost to the customer.
Perfect. And regarding carbon, obviously that was mentioned in the video as well. So what are your plans for regarding carbon modelling and being able to actually capture the carbon data associated with concrete?
Yeah, so we've actually just been successful on winning quite a large grant with HS2 as a partner on there. So we've just won an almost £900,000 grant, and the part of that grant money is to actually engage Carbon Trust, and Carbon Trust are going to work with us to basically model our system and model the concrete that goes through our system, so we can certify every cubic meter of concrete that comes through our system with an accurate carbon footprint, which is certified by Carbon Trust and trusted. What that means is if one of our customers, saves a truckload of concrete, for example, that's about 2,000 kilograms of carbon, 2 tons of carbon in one truck. And we can actually then start to reward those carbon credits back to the customers that are acting correct, because we're moving into a world now where carbon credits will need to be bought by incumbents, by concrete companies, by construction companies. So any wins they can get in terms of saving those carbon credits is a win for them. And we want to be able to pass those benefits on to the customer through our system. And we need to go through an organized, recognized system like Carbon Trust to do that. So we're working on that in the next 12 months.
Perfect. And what's kind of the big, hairy, audacious goal? What's the end game for you guys? What's your roadmap?
Well, the big, hairy, audacious goal is to deploy firstly across London and HS2, hopefully. There's actually not huge amounts of trucks on those two projects. There might only be, I don't know, probably less than 1,000 trucks across the whole of London and HS2. And that will really validate our UK value proposition. And because we're working with basically the two world's biggest concrete companies, I think they have something like 20% global market share of ready mix. We can scale rapidly. And if we're on every single truck on the planet, which is only about 400,000 trucks, so it's not that much in terms of deployment, we believe that we can save about 1% of global CO2 and £40 billion to industry. Now, this is just the loss of material value and the cost of recycling or disposal. This isn't including, once we make concrete testing obsolete because we can digitize it, and each concrete test might cost 50-60 pounds, and you can only do 5 a day because you need a dedicated technician to do them. We can turn these technicians, instead of driving around to different sites to do concrete tests, we can turn them to analysts where they analyze the tests, spot patterns, and create a better product and less waste in the future. So there's a huge way to go here, but I think BIM integration will be a big turning point for us. And and if we can get the surplus redistribution model on HS2, then we'll show that we can prevent all of the waste in concrete and not just pick from the edges.
Fantastic, brilliant. And then I suppose mentioning there, obviously, the money that you've saved, is that globally? Is that how much you would save globally per year, or is that just in the UK? Sorry.
Yeah, the 40 billion is global. Obviously, every project we work with is different. So we've estimated on phase 1 we could save HS2 around 25 to 40 million, depending on where we're working and how accurate the concrete numbers are that are advertised online, because we haven't fully dived into that yet. So just working on public knowledge. But it's pretty clear metrics. We know how much concrete costs per load, and we know how much it costs to dispose in any one region. And if you lose a batch of concrete from a rejected, if your stump's not right or your flow's not right, you take the hit for that loss of the material as a concrete provider. But you've also then got to dispose of that, and there's no real cheap solutions out there or effective solutions. Even recycling is very expensive, very energy intensive in terms of CO2, and all you get back after recycling is a low grade aggregate anyway. So why not use that concrete when it's still wet, still fresh, if it hasn't passed the slump test, or if you've overordered a little bit on site, which engineers will often overorder 10% to make sure they have enough to fill the hole. Then there's perfectly good fresh concrete that we have transparency of, so we know the quality, the location, the volume, and we can redistribute it on site very easily, especially if we're integrated in something like BIM and can see the project schedule and understand what pours are happening around us that day. We can almost automate that process.
Fantastic, brilliant. So I think that is all of the questions for today. So, oh no, sorry, there's one more that just came in. So really impressive on carbon savings alone. If 100 cement trucks were to arrive at site, do you have a feel for how many trucks you could avoid from wastage if there was 100?
Yeah, I mean, rejected batches are around 3% of the wastage, 2 to 3%. And if you have 100 concrete trucks on site, you've only got 90 minutes to pour the concrete from when it was batched. So if you've got 100 trucks, you can almost guarantee that at least the back 3/4 aren't going to pour in time, depending on how many pouring points you've got. But this is one of the case studies that we go through on one of our demos. We can show that, if it often happens, you get too many trucks arriving to a site too quickly, which means that the meters per hour is too high, and the logistics in London or wherever you are, wherever you may be, aren't working out for you. So what would normally happen, traditional wisdom, you would send the first truck in first, the second truck in second. We can intervene, and actually the 5th truck back is going to set first, so he needs to go in first, and then we can avoid that entire wastage of that truck. So these sorts of insights, will really start to impact on operations. And we'll start to be able to utilize this surplus concrete on things like temporary works or low grade works and non-structural. But in a nutshell, yeah, if you ever have 100 trucks turning up to a site, that isn't huge and demanding one of the biggest pours ever, you're going to waste a hell of a lot of concrete, because obviously concrete is a time, it's kind of a finite good, and you've got only 90 minutes to pour. I think on within Tidewave's project, I think if you don't pour within an hour, they just automatically reject it. Now that's totally absurd, because they reject it after an hour because it's water facing and there could be problems with it. But the reason they reject it is because they don't have the transparency of the quality in the drum. Whereas we could literally tell them, no, this is fine to go in, this one isn't, this one is. And that's the kind of transparency we want to bring to the industry, as well as digitize concrete testing and all the complex issues around that. Because at the minute, we only test probably between 1 in 10 and 1 in 30 trucks that come to site. Whereas we run hundreds of tests, literally 1 a second, while the truck's driving to site, and we can see that predictive curve. So yeah, we just want to transform it and digitize it, much like the theme of this of a lot of these projects are.
Fantastic. I've never been so interested in concrete. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience probably feel the same way. They've been completely enlightened. Thank you so much, Phil. As I said before, guys, connect with Phil, scan the QR code there and connect with him on LinkedIn to find out more about Cloud Cycle and himself. Again, join the networking sessions at 5 o'clock to speak to Phil a little bit more closely about this. Thank you so much. Oh, I think there is time for just one more question that's just come in. So Is all of the concrete on HS2, sorry to do this, is all of the concrete on HS2 being delivered by road? If not, will the technology be incorporated into other systems? And for other projects, will it be incorporated into other systems like freight, like rail freight, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the stats on how much ready mix by road is being delivered on the site, but you know there are very few concrete railway trucks. There's many reasons why that wouldn't happen, because you get concrete on the tracks, and you know you can't get granular enough location based. But ultimately, anywhere where there's ready mix concrete that is going from a location to another location, you're going to lose transparency of it, and we can shine transparency on that, whether it's on a train, on a plane, on a bike, on a truck, and we can even have, you know, that little hand mixers on site. We can put our technology on the hand drum mixers on site, and you'll just get an alert like a microwave when your concrete is cooked to the right slump within the hand mixer on site. So these are the types of things we're thinking about, and you know, so we can adapt our technology to anything. We're speaking with Lafarge Holcim as well about, you know, they've got a fleet of electric concrete trucks. Our technology can use electric trucks just like we can use hydraulic trucks to get the concrete slump and flow. So we're already future thinking in terms of, okay, what happens when the fleets are electric, and we can deploy it across electric as well.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Thanks so much for your time, Phil. So just a general question that I've received a couple of times regarding the networking rooms. So there will be a link shared in the chat prompting the events team any second now, I imagine. So finally, we're just going to hear from a couple last speakers, and then when the session ends, click on the room that you would like to attend, and then you'll be transported into the correct room. So just next up then, to finish off the event, we're going to hear from Howard Mitchell again, Head of Innovation, just to summarise the day.
Well, hi everybody, and certainly that's been an absolutely sort of fascinating series of presenters. So firstly, thank you to everybody who has either introduced or presented during the session today. I have another couple of thanks in terms of making cohort 1 the success that you have seen today. Our partners at the Connected Places Catapult and Bruntwood, who own Innovate Birmingham, the home of our accelerator, who have been instrumental in actually driving some of the successes. In terms of the headlines that I'd like to share with everybody today, in the last 4 months, these 5 companies have worked incredibly hard within the HS2 program and with our supply chain. The challenge I gave to them when they joined us, I said, this is an opportunity for you to have access to key people in the program, and that opportunity, it will only be as successful as the amount of effort that you put into it. And I'm so proud to now actually say, recently the companies presented today have now secured pretty much all of them have now secured contracts with us or our supply chain, or are in the process of doing it. So I think we have 4 actually secured and 1 in negotiation. The value of those contracts exceeds £1 million, and those of you who are working in startups will know sometimes, you know, those triple-figure contracts make a massive difference, especially when you have the partners that we've talked about today, some of the larger companies. In addition, as alluded to by Phil in the final presentation, by building consortia across the program, our accelerator companies have managed to secure UK research and innovation funding, which is absolutely fantastic. And hopefully that will add additional benefit well beyond the HS2 program. In terms of the day-to-day of being on the program, people have participated in over 34 workshops where they've developed their products and projects, where they've actually been liaising with key people from around our organization, certainly from the top of our board all the way through our organization have been made available, and they've really seized that opportunity and had multiple conversations to enhance their business. The final thing that I think has been really interesting is there have been 34 independent conversations regarding investment and further financing for the companies on our accelerator. We as HS2 are a large government program, and we really want to encourage investment in construction innovation. And I'm really, really proud that we've got over 16 venture capitalists on the call today, who are looking at these great new companies, which we're proud to support. And I hope you'll reach out and get in contact with them further in the future. So finally, I would very much like to thank Jazz for doing a fantastic job today in terms of a very professional presentation, all of our presenters, and also a special mention to Rob Cairns from my team, who has been instrumental in getting cohort 1 to be as successful as it is. We already have cohort 2 underway, so in a few months' time we'll be conducting one of these again, and there will be 5 new companies sharing some great insights with you. And then as we move into next year, we will be raising cohorts 3 and 4 with some great new challenges. And in fact, one of them we will be doing with other partners